From portals that literally break the laws of physics to kamikaze sharks that could wipe out entire teams. Marvel Rivals has a lot of confusing abilities, so to help you understand the game, we've compiled and explained every single Marvel Rivals ability and ultimate, including hidden text, features, and tips to maximize the ability's effectiveness. Make sure you check the description to find the timestamps. Starting with the abilities, we have Adam Warlock. He has 250 health, and his weapon Quantum Magic does 50 damage per hit and can shoot 2 times a second. It can critical hit, making it more worthwhile to headshot. However, his charge-up attack can shoot up to 5 bullets, does not headshot, and each pellet does 38 damage. It's best to open with a cluster and then finish off with a headshot. His primary ability, Avatar Livestream, is a 2-charge healing burst that heals for 95 on up to 2 people. However, a single charge takes 6 seconds, and you only get 2, so use them wisely. Additionally, if Adam takes damage, you can self-heal, and it heals 35 plus the initial 95. His next ability, Soul Bond, which when placed on an ally, forces the damage you take and the ally it's placed on to be split between you, up to 250 damage at once. It also heals 10 per second, and the bond lasts 6 seconds. And lastly is his passive, which allows him to revive every 105 seconds. Adam Warlock's ultimate, Karmic Revival, is a fairly easy to understand ultimate. When he uses this for 10 seconds upon casting, any teammates that die within 30 meters of Adam and his ult will be revived. During the spell time, his ult monitors for any fallen allies, including ones that have already died, meaning that as long as the death timers are still up for your allies, they can be revived. Upon revival, they receive 100 health and have a small period of invincibility time. Additionally, it has an energy cost of 5,000, both healing and damaging build to this. Next is Cloak and Dagger, who both together have 250 health. These two do function separately from each other, but share the same health pool. All you need to know is that Dagger is the healer, Cloak is the damager. With that said, we're going to start with Dagger. Dagger's primary fire is a homing projectile. However, the damage is pretty bad, only doing 15 per hit. Its main use will be healing, as it heals 10 per hit with an AoE heal of 18. So each burst can heal the target you hit for 28, and anyone around them for 18. Additionally, it fires 2.27 times per second, and it can bounce off of walls. So your ally does not have to be in your line of sight. If you throw it at a wall, it will bounce off and try to home to them. While Cloak's primary is pretty simple. It does 75 damage per second, has infinite ammo, and is not a projectile. The only ability Cloak and Dagger share is the ability to swap between characters. Swapping between Cloak and Dagger is an instant cast. With Dagger, her 2 main abilities are her Veil of Light Force and Dagger Storm. Dagger Storm is a small spell field that heals you when inside. It heals for about 55 a second and is a great way to live in 1v1. It has a 12-second cooldown though, so use it wisely. While her Veil of Light Force casts a window that travels forward, healing 45 to each person and boosting healing by 15% for 4 seconds. However, Cloak's abilities are more for damage, as his first primary ability, Terror Cape, is similar to Veil of Light Force, but instead of healing, enemies struck with it are blinded for 1.5 seconds, and the damage they take is increased by 20% for 3 seconds. Additionally, it's on a 12-second cooldown and does 55 base damage. His second main ability, however, is Dark Teleportation. When used, Cloak and everyone within 10 meters of him will become invisible and get a movement boost. However, it does have a hidden ability that isn't really described on the website. When people are invisible, they are immune to attacks entirely. So ultimates that would one-shot you like Iron Man Pulse can be easily avoided by right-clicking right before impact, as the invisibility lasts for about a second. Additionally, Cloak can fly into the air using this ability if you hold space while using it. It's great for repositioning to high grounds or getting away if you need to. Next, we have Cloak and Dagger, and let me tell you, as a Cloak and Dagger main, no one is using this ultimate right in the metal ranks. First and foremost, what their ult is a 3-burst dash that throws an AoE area that does 2 main things. Put simply, heal and damage. It does both at the same time. However, a lot of people use this defensively to try and keep enemies out while healing allies, but it's actually much better used to initiate a fight, especially in scenarios where you are the attacking team, as the healing does 220 per second, and if you combine this with other ultimates, you can easily walk into controlled spaces. The energy cost is 3,400. Jeff, however, with a base health of 250, his primary and secondary fire is as follows. His left click is a projectile beam that heals for 140 per second and can heal multiple allies at once. As far as I know, there is no disparity between the healing allies receive. At least the website doesn't say that, and I couldn't see the difference when healing in the range. While his secondary is also a projectile that does damage from the right click, doing 25 damage per projectile and 40 damage AoE bursts. You can rack up more damage by firing it into more than one enemy, but it's also good for 1v1s, as you can kill most enemies in 4 hits. For his primary abilities, things are a little bit different. His left shift ability is the ability to swim in the ground and on walls. His hitbox is also reduced, and he gets self-heal. However, the thing most players don't know is that Jeff can press his left shift while still airborne to fall faster. For his E ability, he can throw bubbles. However, they're actually better to use for yourself, but you can throw them out quickly for allies if they need them, as they do heal 85 each, and they boost the healing received. There are 6 charges, with each one taking 6 seconds per bubble to recharge. And then lastly is his passive, which reduces the damage that Jeff can take from critical hits by 50%. Jeff's ultimate is probably one of the most hated in the game, but it's really not that good. Upon use, Jeff will swim underground and activate a large 10-meter circle. Anyone in the circle when the animation is up will be swallowed, both allies and enemies. Once swallowed, no one can escape, including allies. Jeff has to spit you out. There is a separate keybind for both. Any allies that Jeff swallows will heal for 225 every single second, while enemies will take 25 damage per second. The ult duration is 6 seconds from the time you use it. The best way to use Jeff's ult is to swallow enemies and spit them off the map. Aim at the ground when firing people off the map. Even people with movement abilities will have a difficult time, as the momentum from him spinning them will make the timing really tricky. The only people who can probably get away are people like Wanda with her fly or Hela. If you absolutely have to, you can jump off with them. Just make sure you spit your teammates out first. The energy cost is 4,000. Like all healers, this includes healing and damage. Loki's base health is 250, and he can create copies of himself that also have 250. Additionally, he can right-click to become invisible. This invisibility has no time limit, and he heals for 20 a second while in it. But any actions other than casting Devious Exchange, reloading, or casting Doppelganger will make him visible and give him a 15-second cooldown on it. His main attack heals enemies or damages allies for 40 healing and 30 damage respectively. His clones can also do this as well, and they aim the direction that you are shooting. And to summon those clones, you can use his primary ability, Doppelganger. He has 2 charges, with each charge taking 12 seconds to fully recharge. By pressing his secondary ability, he can swap places with the clones, and can also do this while invisible. There is a 15-second cooldown on the swap. Second to last is his healing spell field, which converts incoming damage by 30% into health and heals for 100 per second. You can break the stone that casts it, and it only has 100 health. But it also lasts 5 seconds on a 25-second cooldown, so you could just wait it out. Lastly is his normal melee, which does 30. But if you hit someone from behind, it does 45. Loki's ultimate is super easy to understand. You can copy anyone, whether it's your teammate or the enemy. Activating this will immediately give you their kit, and you will automatically have their ultimate at full charge. It lasts for 15 seconds and has an energy cost of 3,700. Additionally, using some ultimates will actually reset the timer for Loki. Like for example, if you copy Luna Snow, wait a while for the timer to tick down, and then use her ultimate, the ultimate seems to reset. Luna's base health is 275. Her main attack is 3 individual projectiles that heal for 20 each, for a total of 60. There is fall off, and she can fire 2 bursts of 3 twice per second. So her healing is roughly 120 per second, but she can critical hit enemies when she's damaging. So theoretically, if you hit all headshots, you could do up to 240 damage per second. Her primary abilities are Share the Stage and Ice Arts. While Ice Arts is active, Luna Snow can heal 75 per round and damage 50 per round. She also gains a self heal, and the duration is 6 seconds with a 5-second cooldown. Share the Stage, however, gives a passive healing boost of 35% and stays on the target you keep it on. The person that has it will have a small snowflake around them, and they heal for any amount of healing you give to other people at 35%. Most people like to put it on a tank, but it's actually better to put on a dive DPS, as healing the tank will give the dive DPS a ton more health due to the 35%. Her other ability, Absolute Zero, is a 2.7 second stun freeze that does 5 damage. Lastly are her 2 passives, starting with Smooth Skate. When Luna Snow runs forward for half a second, she will get a speed boost and can jump higher. Her second and last passive, Cryo Heart, applies when Absolute Zero or Ice Arts is activated. She gets a 30 per second passive heal on herself. And speaking of Luna, her ultimate is a little confusing, but pretty straightforward. Upon casting, it gives a shield value of 250 and grants 200 health. Additionally, you can swap between 2 modes, damage and healing. While blue, she's healing, indicated by the larger yellow bar. While purple, she's damage boosting. She heals for 250 a second and damage boosts for 40%. Next is Mantis, with a base health of 275. When you play her, you'll notice these 4 symbols. These are called life orbs. Nearly everything in her kit functions off of these life orbs. Her primary fire does 50 damage and can headshot for up to 100. She can fire 2.5 times per second, and there is no fall off at all, which is insane, by the way. Additionally, if you use an ability in Mantis' kit that uses a life orb, if you headshot someone, it will regenerate a life orb. With that said, her heal is a right click that consumes 1 life orb. No aim required, it heals 55 immediately, but it does heal for 20 a second over 8 seconds after. So it's best to heal an ally 1 time, not twice, once, and only heal them again if they absolutely need it, because the healing over time does not stack. Healing again will just reset the timer. Now, for her primary abilities. Mantis does have a sleep ability called Spore Slumber that stuns the enemy for 3.5 seconds and does 10 damage on impact. However, people don't actually know this for some reason, but you can stop the sleep. An illusion of Mantis will appear behind the slept enemy. So if the enemy's teammates shoot the illusion, it can and will wake them up. It only takes 100 damage as well. The ability itself has a 15-second cooldown. Her next abilities are two buff abilities, Natural Anger and Allied Inspiration. Both are buffs, put pretty simply. When she buffs herself, she can do an additional 12% damage. She does get other effects, but it's not from the ability, it's from her passive. With that said, she does get a slight heal over time effect that heals 12.5 a second for 8 seconds, while her ally buff also gets the same heal and buffs, and gives the ally 12% as well. And last but not least is her passive, Nature's Favor. As mentioned before, she gets passive healing and a slight movement boost. But this is Nature's Favor, not the abilities. Because when consuming a life orb, she gets the passive healing. However, if she is out of combat, she gets a movement boost, moving 8.5 meters per second instead of her usual 6. Mantis' ult, Soul Resurgence, is somewhat similar to Luna. Upon using it, it gives you 150 health per second, but gives a one-time heal upon use of 200 to her and her allies. It also gives a movement boost to everyone around her at 3 meters per second. This does stack with normal movement boosts, so characters like Black Panther, who have 7 meters per second, will be slightly faster than people like Jeff, who have a default speed of 6. Additionally, any healing past max health converts to overhealth with a cap of 100. The ult lasts 8 seconds and has an energy cost of 3700. Next is Rocket, who has a base health of 250. His main weapon has two modes, Bombard mode and Repair mode. Put simply, he can heal or damage. For his Bombard mode, he can fire 12 rounds per second, with each round doing 16. They can headshot, however, making the absolute max you can do under his pretext 384 damage per second, which sounds insanely busted as most tanks only have double this health. But the damage fallout starts at 10 meters and caps at 40% by 20. So realistically, you will probably never be in the position to get the max damage. His heal mode, however, is a little different, as he can shoot bouncing spheres that heal. With 2 rounds per second, each one can heal for 60 per second. He can heal himself as well, which is something that a lot of other supports don't have, although it's only 30 per second on himself. His primary abilities, BRB and Jetpack Dash, are fairly unique, especially with his BRB, which is a placeable, destructible beacon that can revive allies with full health if they die within 50 meters. Additionally, this can give Rocket armor health packs that provide 25 bonus health, and he can even recall this ability. The overall duration is 300 seconds. But if you recall it with more health, the original 45-second cooldown can get as low as 5 seconds with max health. It scales with the health left on it, so if you see somebody trying to damage this, pick it up before then. While his Jetpack Dash lets him dash 10 meters in the direction he's moving with 2 charges, and each charge takes 6 seconds to regenerate. Lastly is his 2 movement abilities, both bound to the jump keybind. One of them allows Rocket to descend slowly while in the air, while the other allows him to crawl around on the wall like a little rat. With these abilities, he can be really annoying to hit. Rocket's ultimate, Siga, is one of the more unclear ones. However, it's actually probably the simplest ult in the game. It's a destructible beacon that gives 40% damage increase. It has 800 health, lasts 12 seconds, and anyone that is receiving the effect should have a visual indicator that looks like a yellow string. Lastly, it costs 3700 energy. Next is Captain America, who has a base health of 650. The main function of his kit is his shield, which is a 400 health circular shield. It can deflect projectiles, although it does it at random. This does not apply to beams, like Cloak's primary. If the shield breaks, there's a 5-second penalty, and the average recharge time for any health loss is 50 per second. While Captain America's main weapon, Sentinel Strike, is a melee type weapon that does 40 per hit. Next is his primary ability, Leading Dash, which is a run ability similar to Black Widow's. However, while running, you can use his other primary, Super Soldier Slam, which allows him to launch forward in a designated zone, knocking enemies up and dealing 30 damage to each one. It has a 12-second cooldown and the maximum jump speed is 20 meters. You can see where you'll land before using it, and his secondary ability, Liberty Rush, is a quick charge ability that does 30 damage on impact. This also has a 12-second cooldown. And lastly is his Vibranium Energy Saw, which can ricochet similar to that of his primary. However, this ability has an 8-second cooldown meant to do large amounts of damage in a group. It can bounce between enemies, doing about 70 damage per hit, but reduces by 20% on each hit. Captain America's ultimate, Freedom Charge, is fairly easy to understand. It's a buff ultimate that buffs him and creates a small AoE that buffs allies that walk into it. When used, Cap will gain 150 bonus health and grant allies 100. Every single second afterwards, he will gain 110 and grant allies 60. Additionally, he and his allies get a 30% boost in movement speed. This ult is great for initiating fights or even saving fights at the end of them. The energy cost is 3400. Next, we have Doctor Strange. He has 650 health. His main abilities that a lot of people use him for are his shield and ability to fly, as well as his portal, but we will get to that. The shield has 800 health and charges at a rate of 80 per second. Additionally, if you try to fly while holding the shield, it will let it down, so be careful when doing this as there's a 1 second delay on the shield. However, his main attack is a single shot 5-round projectile, with each pellet doing 18 damage, so you can do roughly 100 damage if you hit all 5. But there is a damage fall off, starting at 10 meters, stopping at 20. So it's better to shoot at larger targets or closer targets, because you want to hit as many of these as possible. The reason for this is because the more damage you do with this primary, the more his dark magic meter will build, indicated by a number near your crosshair. This meter is better to build higher because his later ability, Maelstrom of Madness, does more damage with more charge. Maelstrom of Madness is an ability that launches an AoE attack, releasing all of the dark magic in his meter. However, be careful, as once the meter hits 100, it will activate his negative passive, the Price of Magic, which will cause you to get a 3-second debuff that prevents healing on yourself. But don't worry, you can release this dark magic to do damage with his next ability. All you need to know is that each point of dark magic does 1.3 damage. So a full charge can do 130 in a full AoE, meaning you can hit everyone around you for 130 damage max. This does reset his meter fully. Additionally, a bit of a tip, the more dark matter he has, the brighter his cape will shine with a purple pentagram. Lastly is his portal ability, Pentagram of Hela, which has a shockingly long cooldown time of 180 seconds. But it makes sense, because the ability is very cool and it allows you to create a portal and not only shoot things through it, but also walk through it, while still being able to place it quite literally anywhere. Regardless, it's great for flanking and taking aggressive off angles. Using this can get you some seriously busted plays, while the actual portal itself lasts 20 seconds. This one's pretty easy to understand. The Eye of Agamotto is a 3-second stun. It's called Soul Separation, but it's really just a 3-second stun that does 60 damage. The stun applies to anyone around him with 10 meters. There is a charge up time and you can be stunned out of it, so use it wisely. Also, fun fact, you can damage the soul that separates. So during this ult, the enemy technically has 2 hitboxes. For some reason, a lot of people don't actually know this. AoE damage is much more effective with this ult. The ult cost is 3,400. And next is Groot. This kid's pretty simple. He has 700 health and his primary fire, Vine Strike, does 70 damage. It takes 0.7 seconds to fire, and it cannot critical hit, but it's strong enough to nearly 3-shot most characters, so you can burst down most characters in 2.1 seconds, give or take. His secondary fire, Spore Bomb, is a small projectile that does damage once it hits someone or hits the ground. It does 55 damage on impact and shoots out 6 spores that do 10 damage each. This is a great way to get finishing kills, as his normal range is extremely limited. His melee has special properties, however, where he can strike twice normally, with his third strike launching enemies in the air. Next, we have Groot's main abilities, his walls. His Thornlash walls, which are on his left shift, can be placed within 15 meters of Groot, and each wall has 250 health. Additionally, these walls have 2 charges, and each used charge takes 6 seconds to refresh. He does have a wall cap of 3 walls, so if you have 3 up already and try to place a 4th one, it will not work. These walls also have a hidden ability. When Groot is near any of his walls, they get a status effect called Awaken. The Thornlash wall specifically will attack any enemies near Groot's walls that attack him or his team, doing 60 damage twice per second. Plus, the walls do not break unless they are damaged, and there is no clear time indication. While his next wall, Ironwood Wall, is larger and has more health, with 700 HP. While awakened, this wall will give Groot bonus health based on the damage that he or his allies deal. So, any enemy that Groot damages will give Groot 40 bonus health, up to 250 total. It has an 8-second cooldown and a 10-meter range, with his passive being the ability to awaken the walls. His ult's pretty simple. He throws out a ball of vines that will tie anyone hit with it into place, dealing 10 damage from the initial ult, 70 damage from the AoE, and 20 damage twice a second while in it. This ult lasts 3.5 seconds and has an ult cost of 2,800. Hulk. He has 3 forms: his human form, his base Hulk form, and his ultimate Hulk form. Starting off with his human form, he has 200 health, and his only weapon is his Gamma Ray Gun that does 16 damage, can critical hit, and fires 5 rounds per second. His only other ability while in this form is his Gamma Grenade, which does 40 damage on impact and launches enemies up. Word of advice though, try not to use this when your enemy is a higher health, as this will make it harder for you to hit them since your weapon is a projectile. You could end up accidentally giving your enemy time to kill you by launching them, so only use this if you have to, or can finish them with it. The only goal for base form Bruce, however, is to do enough damage to charge his ultimate to change back into normal Hulk. Once you do transform into Hero Hulk, however, this is where your main kit comes into play. His base attack does 40 damage, and you can attack roughly twice per second. And apparently, it is an AoE spell field, so you could potentially hit more than one person. But both enemies would have to be directly next to each other within 4.5 meters, so it's quite unrealistic. While his right-click Gamma Burst has an 8-second cooldown and does 70 damage that can pierce through enemies. Additionally, his primary ability, Radioactive Lockdown, does 5 damage but stuns anyone hit with it for 2 seconds. The trade-off, however, is that no one else can really damage them. You can, however, hit them by using his normal attack or his right-click. His secondary ability, Indestructible Guard, generates shields for him and any allies surrounding him. The shields last 2.5 seconds and the cooldown is 12. The shields have 250 health, and any damage that these take are generated into Hulk Smash Charge, which builds to his ultimate. Lastly is his jump, which lets him press and hold his jump key to increase the distance at which he can jump. The longer he holds it, the further he can jump, indicated by a blue arrow that appears while holding. Hulk's ultimate is just a third form pretty much. When you are Hero Hulk, you can ult to turn into Monster Hulk. Your health will be 1400, but you have a small charge up time when using it. However, when you do attack enemies, they will fly. And since Hulk does melee damage primarily, if you aren't careful, you're going to knock the enemies away from you, only making it harder to kill them. Also, you can press Q again on a single target while in this form to grab an enemy and just beat the shit out of them. It does 5 hits with 40 damage each. You also can't do anything else while in this, and you cannot cancel allies. Although you do get a 30% damage reduction while doing it though, which is pretty cool. The energy cost is 3400. Magneto is a Vanguard hero that has a base health of 650. His main attack does 35, but spawns small AoE fields that do 40 damage at its center. His main function, Metal and Iron Bulwark, is the ability to create shields on himself or allies. Regardless of who he puts it on, it has a 2.5 second duration unless broken, and also has a 300 health. However, if it is broken, for every 100 damage it takes, Magneto gains 1 ring. These rings can be used with his right-click attack, which releases the rings, doing 40 on the first ring, 65 on the second, and 90 on the third. So it rewards saving them for more damage. His second ability, Metallic Curtain, has a 100 energy resource that blocks any and all projectiles for up to 2 seconds because it consumes 50 per second. However, there is a meter that determines how much time you have left. There's a 3-second cooldown and the recharge speed is 11 energy per second. Lastly, his passive, which lets him descend slowly like Hela. Magneto's ultimate, Meteor M, is pretty confusing, so I won't explain all the technicalities. All you need to know is that it's a sphere projectile that pushes Magneto into the air when used and will soak up any and all projectiles shot while it is up. This includes other ults that shoot projectiles like Starlord's ult. It does more damage with each projectile for a max damage increase of 800, starting at 100 when initiated. It has an energy cost of 3100. Peni has a base health of 650. Her primary fire is a rapid fire projectile that does small AoE damage. The base projectile does 15, while the splash AoE also does 15. It fires 3.33 times per second, and her secondary fire, which is her right click, is a web that stuns the enemy for 0.7 seconds upon hit. Additionally, this next ability isn't really a passive, as all her abilities say this. Regardless, Peni receives a 25 healing per second buff while in the cyber web. Additionally, any healing that would push past her max health will turn into bonus health. She also gets a 25% movement boost while in it. Next is the main use of her kit, the Bionic Spider Nest, which spawns 2 spider drones every 3 seconds. Each one does 40 damage, and they can stay around, meaning until this nest is broken, they do not disappear, unless used. The nest has 350 health and has a 15-second cooldown. Next are her Arachnomides, which have 4 charges, with each one taking 4 seconds to recharge upon use. They do 100 damage, and the AoE does not have fall off. So, if the mine goes off, if the enemy is in the radius at all, they are guaranteed to take 100 damage. Her secondary ability is her Cyber Bond, which is essentially a spiderweb that attaches to things. She can use it to pull herself up to places or away from them. However, if she ventures too far from its placement zone, it will trigger a pullback. It's on a 3-second cooldown. Lastly is her Wall Crawl, which, you guessed it, lets her crawl on walls. Peni's ultimate, Spider Sweeper, is an ultimate that combines everything else into her kit. Essentially, when she uses this, she can run around dropping mines, webs, and spiders behind her. It's a great area of control ultimate. She attacks once a second, but drops spiders and mines every 0.7 seconds. There is a 7-mine cap, though. The duration is 12 seconds, and the sweep damage is 60, which again happens once a second. She gets 450 bonus health on use and a 70% movement boost. It's not fully clear on if this stacks with her yellow webs, but it doesn't specify, so I'll assume it does. The energy cost is 3400. And then next is Thor, who has a base health of 500 and his main weapon Mjolnir does 45 damage every 0.6 seconds. When awakened, it also launches lightning, but we'll get to that in a second. While his right click ability throws his hammer, and it throws slower than it returns. But on the throw it does 70 damage and 35 on its way back. His primary abilities are as follows. He has a chargeable dash that does 40 damage on no charge and 60 on full. Additionally, it does consume 1 Thor Force, which is shown in the middle of your screen. While his next ability, Awakening Rune, consumes 3 Thor Force and allows Thor to awaken as mentioned earlier. It grants him shield and bonus health as well, with it lasting 5 total seconds. However, the 200 bonus health he gets only stays for 2.5 seconds. So if Thor takes no damage, he will retain the max bonus health before it starts ticking down, starting at 2.5 seconds, and will decrease over time until gone completely. Additionally, Thor's hammer does more damage in this state. According to the official website, it does 70 projectile damage and 30 damage per person within his spell field. So if you're right up on enemies, you can finish them fairly quickly. His last primary ability, however, is Lightning Realm, which lets Thor erect a small field around him that does 40 damage when touched and gives Thor some of his Thor Force back for each enemy hit. It has a 12-second cooldown and does slow enemies that are within it by 30% for about 4 seconds, which is how long the field lasts. Lastly is his passive, Thor Force, which activates the 200 bonus health and allows you to instantly refresh Thor Force by landing a bash. Each bash you land cuts off 5 seconds from the total recharge time of all 3, according to the official website. Thor's ultimate, God of Thunder, is an AoE strike that is shown to both allies and enemies. When he uses this, he launches himself into the air. The spell field does 40 damage, and when Thor lands in the spell field, it does 220 damage. The ult lasts 1.5 seconds and has an energy cost of 3100. Next is Venom. Venom has a base health of 650, and his main weapon, Dark Predation, allows him to attack enemies about once per second. However, in this 1 second window, he fires about 3 hits, and if he hits every single headshot, he can basically kill a support in 2 fire intervals and a melee. His right click is a slow that activates by attaching tentacles to a nearby enemy. The initial damage is 5 and slows the enemy by 15%. However, if the enemy stays near you, this will activate a second attack that does 80 damage after 3 seconds. However, if the enemy leaves Venom's 11-meter distance, the link will break and he will not get the damage. So if you're facing a Venom and you see him use this, run away. His 2 main abilities are Venom Swing and Frenzied Arrival. Like Spider-Man, he can swing on an 8-second cooldown, although Spider-Man's is less. Again, turn Easy Swing off, it'll be harder to master, but it's going to be so much easier to avoid hitting walls and putting yourself in a bad position. Then his secondary ability is the Frenzied Arrival, which lets him dash while in the air to land down quicker, doing 65 damage at the center of impact. It has an 8-second cooldown, and the slam distance is 40 meters while airborne. His last 2 abilities are his passive and his E ability, which is technically a secondary ability, although his secondary is symbiotic resistance. It's a bit complex to explain, so I'll explain it this way. The more health you're missing when you use this, the more bonus health you will gain. It converts all of your missing health into bonus health, meaning if you're at 25 HP and you use this, you will gain 775 HP if your max is 800. His health does change by season, so keep in mind this will change in future updates. And lastly is his passive, Alien Biology, which allows him to climb on walls, and not only climb on them, but run on them. So you can use this to get some tricky movement. Venom's ult, Beast of the Abyss, is pretty simple. He digs into the ground and becomes an AoE field. The ult gives him an 80% movement boost that both teams can see, and he can wait for the ult to end or click to use it and end it immediately. Once he does, he will do a flat 50% of any enemy's health, as well as 40 damage. Additionally, any damage dealt, including to more than 1 enemy, will convert into bonus health. Its energy cost is 2800. And moving on, we next have Black Panther. Sitting at 300 health, his main attack, Vibranium Claws, can do 35 damage per hit with roughly 2 hits per second. The damage honestly isn't very good, as it can take up to 8 hits to finish off the average health of a single target. But this is where his kit gets a little confusing. Black Panther's secondary fire, Spear Toss, has 2 charges, each on a 6-second cooldown, which attaches a vibranium mark to the enemy when struck with the spear, doing 45 damage on impact from a vibranium field. His secondary ability, Spinning Kick, allows him to dash forward at enemies, dealing 70 damage on an 8-second cooldown. Upon impact, this attaches a vibranium mark as well. Again, with all of these vibranium marks, you're probably confused. So here it is. The main ability that makes use of his vibranium marks is Spirit Rend. It's a dash-like ability that does 80 damage and provides 40 bonus health upon hit. However, you only get the bonus health when you use the dash on an enemy that has a vibranium mark. It does have an 8-second cooldown, but when you hit an enemy that has a vibranium mark, you get it back instantly. Meaning as long as the enemy has a vibranium mark, you can use this ability and instantly get it back while also gaining 40 bonus health. Additionally, his passive Panther's Cunning gives him an additional 20% below 100 HP. The bonus health does not build to this. And lastly, his jump ability lets you climb walls vertically, and once you detach from the wall, you get a double jump. You can probably use this to do some cheeky initiations. Black Panther's ultimate, Vast Descent, put pretty simply, is a high burst single cast attack that does damage in a straight line. Its range from him is 20 meters, with a width of about the size of the visual indicator, which is the Panther, but it's specifically stated to be 22 meters. It does 150 damage and has an energy cost of 3,300. Next, we have Black Widow, whose main weapons are a rifle and batons. You can swap between them, and her batons do 45 damage each, hitting twice per second, while her rifle is just like any old sniper rifle. You can scope in and you can shoot. With a base damage of 120, it can headshot for a max damage of up to 240. When scoped in, it seems there's no fall off distance. However, unscoped has some serious fall off, starting at 10 meters and halving entirely by 20, so it's really not worth no scoping past 10 meters. Next, her primary ability, Fleetfoot, allows her to run faster and even do a boosted power jump while sprinting. The overall movement boost is 33%, and both her jump and her run have an energy cost, which is shown on a bar that gets eaten away at as you use it. Lastly, her secondary ability, Edge Dancer. This ability's range is honestly really bad, at a measly 3 meters on first impact. But when you get right up on an enemy and use it, it does 35 damage, and by pressing the button again in the same combo, you can pull the enemy back towards you, doing another 35 damage. Additionally, it does stun, and knocks the enemy up. Black Widow's ultimate, Electroplasma Explosion, is a bit weird. Upon use, it pushes you into first person and lets you choose to charge it or cancel it. From the looks of it, the first person zoom has about the same FOV as the scope, just without the PNG. Additionally, there's no trade-off for canceling it. You can maintain your ult charge, so as long as you don't hold the charge it, you're good. The ult is more of a debuff than it is a attack. Without charging it at all, it does a blast of 120 damage. With that 1 second charge, it reaches a max of 170. But it does drop this red plasma, which is what gives the slow of 80%. The plasma lasts 10 seconds after use. It has an energy cost of 2,800. Next is Hawkeye with 250 health. His kit's pretty straightforward. His primary fire has 2 modes, a piercing arrow and a blast arrow. You can swap between them. Both have a charge up time, and the projectile does more damage and moves faster the longer you charge it. While charging though, he does get slowed by 30%, so be careful. On his normal piercing arrow, he does 80 damage on a full charge. But you can actually one-shot a lot of squishies with this, as the headshot multiplier is 2, and the damage increases past this, indicated by a meter that increases after holding the charge for 0.7 seconds and looking over an enemy. Because surprisingly, his default arrow does not one-shot even in the head. His blast arrow, however, only does 20 damage. It is awful. But it does have 3 charges that refresh almost instantly unless you aren't charging them, so it's really good for breaking terrain. His other 2 primary abilities are Hypersonic Arrow and Crescent Slash. His slash does 40 damage on a 15-second cooldown, knocking enemies hit with it into the air, while his Hypersonic Arrow does 2 instances of 50 damage each, on a cooldown of 12 seconds. It also slows enemies by 40% for 1 second. And Hawkeye also has a melee that allows him to deflect attacks shot at him. However, he cannot deflect everything, and the timing on this is very weird. While his jump, Skyward Leap, lets him jump in the direction he's moving for additional airtime. Hawkeye's ultimate is a little bit weird. When used, any enemies that Hawkeye can see will have a hologram created every half of a second. Hawkeye can shoot these, and any damage dealt to the after images is done to the main body. The ult itself lasts 10 seconds, and each after image created lasts 3 seconds. The energy cost is 3,700. On to Hela. She has 275 health, and her main attack, Nightsword Thorn, does 70 base damage with a headshot multiplier of 2, I believe. She can shoot 2 bullets a second with minor falloff that maximizes at 30 meters, but starts at 18. Additionally, her right-click ability allows her to throw 4 daggers that do 10 damage on impact each, but will stick to enemies, doing 30 damage each in the form of AoE explosions. While her primary ability, Soul Drainer, is a throwable projectile that stuns enemies hit with it for about a third of a second, which doesn't sound like much, but combined with the initial 1 damage and 40 damage dealt from this attack alone, you can use this to quickly finish enemies by hitting a headshot while they are stuck inside of it. Her secondary ability, Astral Flock, lets her transform into a bird and run away in a single line. She becomes invincible and can cancel out of it by pressing the ability button again. Its cooldown is 12 seconds. Because you can cancel out of the bird ability, you can use it to dodge ults quickly and get some surprise damage in. Lastly are her two passives. When in the air, Hela can hold her jump keybind to slowly descend, while her second passive creates an explosive AoE bird that does 80 damage upon explosion after 1.8 seconds. Hela's ult is fairly simple. She presses it to launch into the air, becoming a stationary turret that has 1,000 health. You can shoot her out of it, or you can wait it out. She does go into first person and can shoot AoE explosion bursts that do 125 each. She can fire 1.79 bursts a second as well, and the ult itself lasts 10 seconds. The energy cost is 4,000. Quick not so pro tip I learned the hard way though. Be mindful of what map you're on. Structures can stop the ultimate. Hela needs open space above her to fly up. It does actually have a travel path, so even a destructible ceiling can and will stop you from ulting. Its energy cost is 4,000. Next, we have Iron Fist, who has 250 health. His primary fire, which is a ranged melee, does 5 hits per cycle, with each hit doing 32 damage. However, the 5th strike does 55. The best way to pull these off is to try to land all 5 hits, because that'll get you the most damage. However, his primary fire is different when you use his right-click ability, which is a slight defense power-up that activates his strengthened primary attack. It also functions as a block, as any damage blocked will convert to health up to 150, and the cooldown is 15 seconds. The strengthened primary does 19 damage per strike at 7 strikes per second. Additionally, his strengthened primary does reduce the cooldowns of his block and strike with every hit, although it's not entirely clear by how much. But as you hit them, you can see it in the bottom, so you can see it for yourself. Next, for his primary abilities, he has a huge lunge kick. Its base damage is 35, and it does more damage on lower health targets, with the max damage of 70 being reached when the target is half health or lower. Although bonus health does not build to this percentage. Additionally, it has a 12-second cooldown. His secondary ability is a 12-second stationary charge ability that regenerates health at a rate of 100 per second. If he uses this past max health, he can get an additional 50 bonus health that does not disappear unless he's hit. The charge lasts 3 seconds, so you could full charge this every time, even from a single HP, and still get the bonus health. Lastly are his two movement abilities. He can run on walls, which is what his passive does. When you combine this with his jumps, he has a ton of mobility. He gets 3 jumps, with each one taking 1 second to recharge. However, you do have to be on the ground for the recharging to start. You cannot get the recharge while in the air. Iron Fist's ult looks confusing, but it's pretty simple. His melee range is doubled, and he gets a 30% damage boost, with a 20% movement boost, while also getting an 80% cooldown reduction on his punches and his blocks. Additionally, when using the ultimate, it recharges Dragon's Defense, which is his block and health converter. So if you use it, then ult, you get it back and can use it again. And because the 80% cooldown reduction is there, the usual 15-second cooldown is instead 3 seconds. That's why this dude feels so hard to kill on his ult. Additionally, he can use the rest of his kit like normal with some slightly buffed stats. It lasts 12 seconds. The energy cost isn't actually mentioned on the website, so we'll say it's at least like 7. After Iron Fist, we have Iron Man, who has 250 health. His kit is mainly made up of his weapon with some other damage abilities alongside it. His base weapon does 55 damage per blast, with the third blast firing twice at once. So it's pretty much a right hook, left hook, double hook. Upon impact, the weapons create small splash explosions that also do 35 damage alongside the initial 55. On the two-hand repulsors, the damage is slightly increased, with the impact doing 65 and the splash doing 40 instead. While his secondary attack is his Uni-Beam, which does 120 damage per second. The only trade-off is that he becomes extremely immobile. His Missile Barrage, which fires 16 missiles and does 20 damage per round, has an 8-second cooldown, while his secondary ability, Hypervelocity, allows him to fly. It consumes energy, and you can't fly forever. The weird part, though, is that you can only fire those missiles if you are flying forward, which is kind of weird. But let's switch it up a bit and cover his self boost, Armor Overdrive. For 10 seconds, Iron Man becomes enhanced, and during this time, both his primary fire and his Unibeam do more damage, and he can use his missiles without having to fly. For example, his Hypervelocity does not consume energy, meaning he can fly forever while this timer is up. The only difference with his missiles, however, is that Iron Man gets 20 missiles instead of 16. Overall, his kit's really confusing, so I'll sum it up for you. Overdrive gives you more damage and more flight. That's pretty much it. Iron Man's ultimate is simple. Pressing it blasts out a giant pulse blast. That's pretty much it. He's immobile while using it, and it has a massive AoE that can one-shot a lot of people. It does 300 damage a second to anything in its path additionally, and 1000 damage at the actual impact explosion site. The ultimate cost is 2800. Next, with magic. Her base health is 250. Her main attack does 65 in an AoE swing. It does less damage the further you are from it. She can attack every 0.83 seconds as well. Her right click, however, lets her throw a projectile after charging it. At minimum charge, it can do 45, but at maximum can do 90. Her two main abilities are her dash, which knocks enemies into the air when used. It does 85 damage with an 8-second cooldown. While her second ability is her stepping disc, which let her teleport. While teleporting, she's invincible to damage entirely. Additionally, for 3 seconds after she's out of the portal, she has the option to activate one of her two other abilities that pair with the discs. The first one being an AoE slash similar to her sword attack that does 45 damage, or she can spawn a 100 health demon that does 20 damage per hit at 4 hits a second. And lastly, her passive, which converts 30% of any damage done to other people into bonus health. So the more damage she does, the more health she gets. However, it does max out at 150, but can still replenish as it's damaged. Magik's ult is bare bones. Put pretty simply, she just gets a stronger form of her base one, turning her into like a half demon or something. So I'll just say the damage and any new effects that happen to the rest of her abilities. Her E ability, which is a sword slice that slashes enemies upwards, does 115 instead of 85, while her whirl does 3 hits of 35 over 0.75 seconds instead of a single hit of 45. Her range charge slash does 90 at minimum and 180 at max instead of the previous 45 and 90. Her little demon has 200 health instead of 100 and does 25 damage 4 times a second instead of 20 damage 4 times per second. Next is Moon Knight. Moon Knight has a base health of 250, and his primary fire is a crescent dart, which does 3 projectiles that can bounce between enemies. The base damage is 25 per round for 75 total. They can headshot, however, and he can shoot once every 0.57 seconds. Lastly, for his projectile, there is a fall off starting at 30 meters, halving his damage by 50. His secondary fire, which is his right click, is very similar. It has a 6-second cooldown and bounces between enemies. However, it does 80 damage on a single projectile. Before covering his main abilities though, let's quickly talk about his movement. Moon Knight can glide by holding his left shift and travels at about 9 meters per second. If you combine both of these with his primary ability, which grapples to a nearby structure and pulls him into the air, you can get way more airtime. The glider does not have a cooldown, but the jump has a 6-second cooldown, and the grapple has a 15-second one. Next, we have his primary abilities, like his bouncing projectiles. His Ancient Ankh is an ability that can bounce projectiles, similar to that of hitting an enemy. However, by shooting it directly in the middle, it will throw the projectiles at the nearest person closest to the Ankh, and will still get the bounce effect. However, it is a destructible, so placing them in doorways or behind walls where they're hard to hit is best. By the time they notice it's there, you can do a ton of damage. Additionally, the Ankh itself is a throwable that can launch people in its proximity up into the air while doing 20 damage. It has a 12-second cooldown. And lastly is his melee, which, similar to Groot, can do a 3 combo that knocks up on the 3rd hit. Next is Moon Knight's ult, Hand of Khonshu, which is an AoE field that launches a ton of hands from a portal in the sky. Each one does 75 and it hits 4 per second. This applies to everyone in the AoE, so everyone standing in the AoE will get 4 hits per second for 75 each. The duration is 3 seconds and the energy cost is 2800. Be careful when using this, however, as it's not instant. There's a 1.5 second charge up time. Place it where you think people will walk, not where they already are unless you don't think they're going to move much. Namor has a base health of 275. His main weapon, which is his trident, does 70 damage per hit and can critical hit. The attack speed is somewhat slow at 1.09 rounds per second. However, it has special effects for the rest of his kit, so the trade-off is worth it. Additionally, his right click launches his trident, which does 40 damage and has a 60 damage AoE. His first primary ability, Aquatic Dominion, spawns a destructible turret squid called a Monstro Spawn. They have 100 health and a 40 meter attack range, doing 17 damage twice per second. There is a fall off at 20 meters, which maxes out at 30% of the cap damage by 40 meters. So never place these past 20 meters if you can. The ability itself has a roughly 12.5 second recharge time per turret. As mentioned earlier, his weapon does recharge the cooldown for Aquatic Dominion. Additionally, critical hitting an enemy will allow the turrets to shoot much faster, pushing the damage down to 11 per hit, but instead allowing them to shoot 5 times per second. The enhanced duration lasts 2. Lastly is his left shift ability, which allows him to become invulnerable for 3 seconds and the ability to float into the air on a 15-second cooldown. Next is Namor's ult, Heart of Proteus, which does damage in an AoE field signified by a circle similar to Moon Knight's ult. The closer you are to the center, the more damage that it does, with 500 being the max in the center and 200 being on the outer. The hit delay is 1.5 seconds from the time it's casted, and when you do get hit, it will immobilize you for 1.5 seconds. The energy cost is 3100. Next is Psylocke, who has a base health of 250. Her main attack is a crossbow that reduces the cooldowns on all of her other abilities. Although the critical damage is specified to be 150% exact exactly on the official website. Her fall off starts at 15 meters and maxes out at 60% of the max damage by 30, while her secondary, wing shurikens, fires a volley of projectiles. This one's a little confusing, so I'll dumb it down. When firing, she shoots 5 projectiles that do damage, and grant her bonus health when recalling them. When recalled, they will come back to her crosshair. Each projectile you land gives you 10 bonus health. Next are her primary abilities, which do receive the cooldown reductions mentioned before. Her first one is her Psyblade Dash. It does 50 damage and has a max range of 12 meters for its initial dash. It has 2 charges that recharge after an 8-second cooldown. Additionally, when you use this ability, if you've thrown your wing shurikens, this ability will automatically recall them. However, it follows the path you dashed in, so it will actually try to travel where you started the dash and end where you ended the dash. So if you're ever facing a Psylocke, be ready to step to the side to dodge additional damage. Lastly, is her invisibility, which, well, lets her go invisible. It lasts for 3 seconds, gives her a 50% movement boost, and the cooldown is 15 seconds. If she's attacked while in stealth, she keeps it, but she will become visible for a very brief period of time. Psylocke's ult, Dance the Butterfly, is pretty simple. It's an AoE attack that locks onto enemies, doing 150 damage per hit 2 times a second. It lasts for 4 seconds. With that said, it has a 20-meter radius and energy cost of 2,800. Next is Scarlet Witch, who has a base health of 250. Her main weapon, Chaos Control, is a beam-type weapon that does 5 base damage per tick and 0.5% of the health additionally. This makes targets with more health take more damage, and additionally, she can fire this 10 times per second. And because of this, it makes you think that it's better to damage tanks, but at the same time, because their health is more, the damage she does likely won't even scratch tanks. So you're better off pressuring squishies. Additionally, doing damage with this primary fire charges her right-click ability, Chthonian Burst. This ability, when used, fires an explosive projectile magic missile that does 30 damage and 35 AoE. Scarlet's primary abilities are Mystic Projection and Dark Seal. Her Mystic Projection allows her to run away, similar to Hela's bird ability. However, Scarlet gets 2 of them, and they take 8 seconds to recharge. Additionally, you can move around freely, unlike Hela. You can also combo them one after another for more height, although it's probably not very smart, as it's your only way to escape. While her Dark Seal allows her to throw a field that detonates by either pressing the keybind to use it or detonates when it hits something. Anyone inside the sphere receives a half-a-second stun, and the sphere detects players every 1.25 seconds. The cooldown is 12 seconds, with her last movement ability being Telekinesis, which lets her fall slowly. Scarlet Witch's ultimate, Reality Razor, is an explosion AoE similar to Iron Man's bomb. However, it does 700 damage, and she is the bomb. Because of this, when she activates it, she begins to heavily slow down up to 35%, and she can be killed out of it. So, doing it out in the open is not good. Popping it behind cover, waiting a couple seconds, then coming out is best. Additionally, there is no fall off. Anyone in the 15-meter range will take 750 damage. The charge up time is 4 seconds. Also, for some reason, the website doesn't really specify the energy costs. So, it costs at least 3 or something. And oh boy, here is the poster child of this video game. We have Spiderman, who has a base health of 250. His main attacks are his punches. However, after landing 2 punches, the third hit will be a kick. The punches do 25 each, while the kick does 40. In total, you can get about 90 damage from one combo. His right click, however, is a web cluster that has 5 charges and does 30 damage on impact. The charges take 3 seconds each to recharge, which is indicated by the symbols below his crosshair. Additionally, anyone hit with the webs will have an icon appear above their head. When they have this icon, any attacks done do an additional 45 damage. So you always want to try and use this on an enemy before initiating. It'll make it so much easier to kill enemies. However, he has even more abilities that you can use to combo, so pay attention. His 2 primary abilities are Get Over Here and Amazing Combo. Get Over Here is a grab ability that will pull enemies towards him, similar to Winter Soldier's hook. However, it does 25 damage and has a max range of 20 meters. Additionally, if the enemy is marked with a spider cluster, instead of pulling them to you, Spider-Man will pull himself to them. So if you're away from an enemy and want to get in close fast, mark the enemy first and initiate with this ability to get instant damage. Then, once you follow up with this hit combo mentioned before, you will almost entirely kill most supports in the game. His last movement or passive ability, Web Sling, allows him to do that Spider-Man thing where he swings on a web. Yep, that's it. And it has 3 charges and takes 6 seconds per charge. Additionally, please turn Easy Swing off. The AI for this is horrible and you will hit walls and die. It's harder to master the swing with it off, but trust me, it's way better this way, as you can actually control it. Next, there is 2 jump abilities, both bound to his jump keybind. Flip and Flip, which lets him double jump only after landing, and Wall Crawl, which lets him do another one of those Spider-Man things, with this last Spider-Man thing being Spider Sense. Not sure if this triggers on invisible enemies, but if it does, that's low-key busted. Spider-Man's ultimate, Spectacular Spin, is just an AoE rapid fire that lasts for 2.4 seconds, shooting webs in the area. It does about 12.5 hits per second with 12 damage per hit. Additionally, it gives you 250 bonus health, and every web hit slows the enemy by 3%. If you land 20 hits on an enemy, it will stun them. The stun lasts 1.5 seconds, and the energy cost is 2,800. Squirrel Girl has a base health of 275. Her primary fire is a burst acorn that has an AoE damage of 110, while her right click is a stun ability that roots enemies hit with it in place for 1.33 seconds on an 8-second cooldown. Since it does a lot of damage per hit, you want to look for weak targets, as this will be the most effective way to secure kills. While her two primary abilities are Tail Bounce and Mammal Bond. Tail Bounce lets her jump upwards with her tail, while Mammal Bond lets her use one ability without consuming a cooldown. By doing this, if you use an ability while it's active, the ability will not be consumed and you can use that ability again. Your best bet is to pop this ability, use the Squirrel Stun, and then use it again, as you pretty much get free kills. Squirrel Girl's unbeatable Squirrel Tsunami is pretty weird. It's just a stampede of squirrels that lasts 10 seconds and can do 150 damage each. But for some reason, a lot of people don't actually know this. They have 600 health. Additionally, the squirrels run about 2.5 times faster than most characters. So don't run, step to the side. The energy cost is 2,800. Next is Starlord. Starlord has a base health of 250. With his main weapon, Element Guns, doing 6.5 damage per bullet, and it can critical hit, so it rewards for good aim and shoots 40 rounds per second, while his right-click Stellar Shift instantly reloads his gun. So if you shoot all of your bullets, you can instantly reload your gun without the animation. The best way to use this is to burst down an enemy, instant reload, and try to finish with the second clip. Each charge has a 5-second recharge time, and you have 2 charges. Additionally, while in the shift animation, you are invincible to everything. If you time this properly, you can dodge one-shot and ultimates. His primary abilities allows him to fly forward, consuming an energy bar, which is indicated. If you use the entire bar, it would take 12 seconds to replenish. The best use for this is to run away or get to high ground. And lastly, his Blaster Barrage, which is an AoE rapid fire ability that slightly restricts his movement, but does about 80 damage per second on an 8-second cooldown. The actual damage numbers are 8 damage every 10th of a second, so this is great for finishing low HP enemies that are often grouped up. Starlord's ult, Galactic Legend, is simple. It's pretty much aimbot. You cannot miss unless you look away. There is fall off past 25 meters, which caps at 40 meters for 60%. So the closer, the better. You get a 20% movement boost while in this ult, and your reload time is reduced by 70%. The maximum locking distance is 30 meters, with the energy cost being 3,100. Storm has a base health of 250. And her main attack, Windblade, does 50 damage, and it can pierce through enemies. It cannot critical hit and fires 2 shots per second. Storm's primary use, although it's not very good right now, is her ability to speed up her allies or give them a damage boost with her weather control ability. She can boost her own speed while in wind mode by 15% and her allies by 8, while the damage boost is 16% for herself and 8 for her allies. While Storm's next ability is Goddess Boost, which put pretty simply increases the power of her buffs that she gives allies and herself. While she is boosted, it lasts 8 seconds and changes her movement boost to 40% and her allies to 20. While the damage boost is 30 for herself and 12 for allies. Also, she does get enhanced thunder for 2 seconds per strike with a damage of 35. Storm's ult, Omega Hurricane, is pretty unique, honestly. She turns herself into a tornado. There's a 5-second selection duration, and the actual tornado lasts 5 seconds. It has 2 ticks per second, and each tick does 75 damage. So pretty much 150 damage per second. Additionally, she gets 350 bonus health, and her normal damage and speed boosting is off while in the ult. Its energy cost is 3,100. Next is Punisher, who has a base health of 275. He has 2 main weapons, those being a rapid fire rifle and a close range shotgun. His rifle does 18 damage per bullet and fires 10 rounds per second. It can headshot, and its fall off starts at 20 meters. His shotgun, however, does 10 damage per round, and it fires 14 rounds at a time. He can shoot about 1.5 times per second, with it also having the ability to headshot, although it's a little bit harder because of the spread. His right click while he has rifle equipped does 45 damage, creating a smoke screen and allows him to see the enemy through it. Although this isn't the ability, it's actually his passive, but I'll get to that. His primary abilities are pretty simple. He has a zipline that he can throw out and can use it whenever he wants. It also stays for a while, so if he places one at the spawn and dies, he can use it again when he respawns. Its cooldown is 20 seconds. While his other primary ability, his turret, is a placeable turret that he can sit in. It has 12 damage per round, shooting 12.5 rounds per second, and has a total health of 600 with a cooldown of 20 seconds. And lastly, his passive, which lets him see enemies that disappear from his sight for a small window of time. This is what lets him see enemies through his smokescreen. A quick tip that could be pretty useful is to quickly hide behind cover, use the silhouette of your enemy to know when to poke back out to win 1v1s. The Punisher's ultimate, Final Judgment, is extremely powerful. His Gatling guns shoot 33.33 rounds per second and do 8 damage each. This makes the burst potential for good aim insanely powerful. He can burst through Luna Snow's ult with ease, even without headshotting. Additionally, in this state, he can make volleys of missiles that do 50 damage and shoots every 3 seconds. Put simply, he's just a walking DPS machine only meant to burn through hell. He can kill most tanks in 1 second like this. His energy cost is 3,400. Winter Soldier has a base health of 250, and his main weapon is a pistol that has projectile travel time, and it is not hit scan. The gun fires 2.5 rounds per second and has 3 ammo. It can headshot, although a lot of his other abilities reload his gun, so keep this in mind. His right click, Bionic Hook, lets him charge it up and pull enemies into him. You can charge it for half a second, all the way up to 4, but the actual max charge is after 1 second of charging it. Additionally, it does 15 damage with a 20 damage AoE and has an 8-second cooldown. His 2 primary abilities, Tainted Voltage and Trooper's Fist, are both his primary finish abilities. Tainted Voltage specifically is a projectile slow that does 55 damage, slows the enemy for 35%, and has a 6-second cooldown. It goes through enemies, so if you fire this into a group, it will hit anyone within its radius. While his other ability, Trooper's Fist, is a dash ability that does damage upon impact. It does 25 at first, then an additional 65 on the second hit. It's great to get quick burst, and it's on a 12-second cooldown. And lastly is his passive, which gives him 30 bonus health when he uses Bionic Hook or Tainted Voltage. Additionally, it also reloads his gun, which is very important for finishing kills as well. Also, the bonus health in his ult is different, giving him 50 instead of the base 30. Winter Soldier's ult, Kraken Impact, sends him into the air, where he can see a visible field of impact. The base damage is 100, but he can one-shot some enemies if their health falls below a certain threshold, which is 20%. He has 5 seconds between calling windows, which is what his instant kill is. But he has 8 seconds to hit another Kraken Impact after calling, as calling an enemy will refresh the ultimate. Even if the impact does not kill the enemy, as long as he kills them within the 5 seconds of the impact, he can still get the kill to refresh the ult. If timed properly, this could theoretically be infinite. The energy cost is 3,100. And last on our abilities list is Wolverine, who has a base health of 300, and his main attack, Savage Claw, is a melee that does 15 damage per strike, but it's similar to Scarlet Witch. He also does percentage-based damage, doing 1.5% of the max health of an enemy. Additionally, he does slightly more damage for each point of rage he's built, signified by both the meter and the red glow that appears around him when used. At max charge, he'll glow red and his hair will change. This is noticeable by both teams. If he's at maximum range, he can do an additional 4.5% per strike, making the maximum he can do 15 plus 6%. This makes him extremely effective at tank busting. Also, quick fun fact, all of his abilities do percent-based damage on his rage, so using most of these with higher rage will get you the most value. While his right click, Vicious Rampage, is a dash attack that does 15 damage per strike. As far as I know, there's 2 strikes as aiming it at the ground shows 2 lines, which means this attack is best used at 100 rage since it also gets the percentage bonus. His 2 main abilities, Undying Animal and Feral Leap, are somewhat similar. His leap is a bit confusing though, so here's all you need to know. You get an initial hit and a hit upon landing. Both do base damage and have percentage damage as well. But since you can pick up enemies and fly with them, you can use this to kamikaze enemies off the map with yourself, which is a very popular strategy in high elo, where players will often trade their life for a tanks. It has a 12-second cooldown. Additionally, his Feral Leap allows you to enter a temporary rage state that seems to be separate from his normal rage meter, however. His secondary, Undying Animal, is a pretty simple 5-second duration that reduces the damage he takes by 50%. It has a 16-second cooldown. And lastly are his 2 passives, Berserker Rage, which builds the rage meter, and boosts the healing he receives from his next passive, Regenerative Healing Factor. It's a bit confusing, so I'll simplify it. It's a 1 HP life save. It will generate bonus health. Any bonus health converts into HP after 3 seconds, and it has a 90-second cooldown. However, every single KO you get, which is essentially any kills done by you or your team, will reduce it by 10 seconds. With his ultimate Last Stand, which knocks enemies forward and airborne. Similar to his normal dash, there's a starting impact and a landing impact for 2 hits, with each one doing 50. There is a percentage damage that stacks, giving it damage equal to 10% of the target's max health, with an extra 0.3% damage for each point of rage. The energy cost is not listed, so at least 5. Well, that should have you covered on all of the abilities. If you want more videos like this, smash like. If we get 1,000 likes, we'll make more informative guides like this. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.